The morning was calm, but the city was already alive. Cars rushed through the wide roads, people hurried with bags in their hands, and the tall buildings stood proudly as if they owned the skyline. Among those buildings was a grand shopping mall, shining with glass walls and decorated lights. It was one of the busiest places in the city. Customers came every day to shop, eat, or simply pass their time. Inside this mall, workers had started their duties early. Shopkeepers were arranging products, waiters were setting up tables in the food court, and cleaners were sweeping the shiny floors to make sure everything looked perfect before the crowd arrived. No one knew that on this particular day, someone very important had decided to walk into the mall not as himself, but as an ordinary visitor. His name was Mr. Armin. To the outside world, he was known as a billionaire and the owner of this very mall, but today he had chosen to leave behind his suit, luxury car, and personal guards. Instead, he wore simple clothes, plain trousers, a cotton shirt, and an old pair of shoes. His face carried no sign of power. He wanted to blend with the people who worked for him, to see their world without them realizing who he was. Armin had always believed that the true heart of a business was not the buildings or the profits, but the people who gave their time and energy to keep it alive. He wanted to see their struggles and joys without the barrier of his identity. Today was one of those secret visits. As he stepped into the mall, the smell of fresh coffee and newly cleaned floors reached him. He walked slowly, pretending to be just another visitor. His eyes observed everything: the young salesman adjusting a mannequin in the clothing store, the old security guard standing firmly near the entrance, and the janitors moving their mops across the wide floor. He walked past shops filled with shining jewelry and expensive dresses. No one looked at him twice. For the first time in a while, he felt invisible, and that gave him a strange kind of freedom. He did not have to shake hands, smile for photographs, or listen to flattering words. He was just another man exploring his own mall. As he wandered, his attention moved toward the far corner of the ground floor. It was a quiet area, away from the main crowd, near the emergency exit. There, he noticed a cleaner bending down, her back slightly shaking. Something about her posture caught his eye. She was not cleaning. She was sitting on a small stool, her face hidden by her hands. Even from a distance, he could sense the weight of her sorrow. Armin paused. He had not expected to see something like this. His steps slowed, and for a moment, he wondered if he should simply walk away. But his heart pushed him forward. He moved closer, quietly, so she would not feel embarrassed. The cleaner was a woman in her mid-30s. Her uniform was plain, her shoes slightly worn, and her hair tied in a simple knot. She tried to keep her head down, wiping her tears quickly as if hoping no one would notice. But her trembling hands betrayed her pain. Armin stood a few steps away, pretending to look at his phone, but his eyes were fixed on her. 1,000 questions formed in his mind. Why was she crying? Was it something personal, or was it because of the work here? He knew many workers in the mall faced difficulties. Some worked long hours for little pay. Others had families depending on them. He had always planned to understand their lives better, but seeing it so close touched him in a way he had never expected. He leaned against the wall, thinking deeply. As the owner, he had the power to change many things, yet here she was, one of his own employees, breaking down silently in a corner where no one cared to look. A mix of guilt and curiosity rose inside him. The mall's bright lights and colorful decorations suddenly felt like a mask. Behind the beauty, there was hidden pain, and this woman was proof of it. He realized that sometimes numbers and reports could never show the true story of the people who worked under him. The woman finally lifted her head slightly, taking a deep breath as though forcing herself to return to duty. She wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve and reached for the mop. She wanted to continue working as if nothing had happened. But Armin knew what he had seen. Her sadness was real, and it was too heavy to ignore. He took a step forward but then stopped again. He wondered, should he talk to her now? If he spoke, would she open up to a stranger? Or would she feel uncomfortable? After all, she didn't know who he really was. Maybe it was better to wait, to find the right moment. Still, something inside him whispered that this meeting was not an accident. He had come undercover to see the truth, and the truth had shown itself to him in the form of a crying cleaning lady. This was the beginning of something he could not yet name, but he felt it strongly. It was going to change both her life and his own. And so, with quiet steps, he walked a little closer, preparing himself to speak. Armin stood only a few steps away from the cleaning lady. His heart felt heavy, though he didn't fully understand why. Maybe it was because he had never been this close to the real struggles of the people who worked in his mall. Numbers, profits, and reports never showed this side of life. This was different. This was real. The woman tried to hold the mop, pressing it against the shiny floor as if nothing had happened, but her eyes were still red. She sniffled quietly and avoided looking around, hoping no one had seen her tears. For workers like her, emotions were private. They had no space for weakness in front of the world. Armin knew he had to say something. He cleared his throat gently, making sure his voice sounded kind. "Excuse me," he said softly, "are you all right?" The woman stiffened at the sound of his voice. She quickly wiped her face again, forcing a small, tired smile. "Yes, sir. I'm fine. Just a little dust in my eye." She tried to laugh, but her voice cracked. Armin's eyes softened. He could hear the pain hidden in her words. She was lying, not out of pride, but out of fear. Workers like her were often afraid to share their true feelings. They worried about losing their job, about being seen as weak or careless. "You don't look fine," Armin replied gently. "Sometimes, it's okay not to be fine." The woman looked at him for the first time. Her eyes, though tired, carried a deep sadness. She seemed surprised that a stranger cared enough to ask. For a moment, silence hung between them. The sound of distant footsteps and a shop's rolling shutter filled the space. Finally, she shook her head. "You don't have to worry about me, sir. I will manage. I always manage." Armin felt a sting in his chest. That simple sentence carried the weight of an entire life, one that probably knew more struggle than peace. He stepped closer but kept his tone casual, careful not to alarm her. "Sometimes sharing helps. Maybe you don't have to manage everything alone." The woman looked down, gripping the mop tightly. "Why would a stranger care about my problems?" she asked quietly. Armin paused. He couldn't tell her the truth that he was the owner of the mall, the one who could change her situation with a single word. He had promised himself he would stay undercover. So, he smiled gently and said, "Because I believe everyone deserves someone to listen." Her lips trembled as though she wanted to speak but held back. She shook her head again, trying to return to her work. But tears rolled down her cheeks once more, betraying her attempt to stay strong. Armin couldn't just watch. "If you want, you can sit for a moment," he suggested softly. "No one will mind. I'll stay here with you." The woman hesitated. A part of her wanted to refuse. Workers were not supposed to sit while customers watched. But something in his calm voice gave her courage. Slowly, she sat back on the stool, covering her face with her hands again. For a while, she didn't speak. Armin simply stood beside her, giving her the space to breathe. He didn't rush, didn't force her to talk. Sometimes silence was the first step to healing. Finally, she whispered, "Life is heavy, sir. Very heavy." Her voice was so soft it almost broke. Armin leaned slightly, his voice steady. "I can see that. But maybe sharing a little will make it lighter." She took a shaky breath. "My name is Mina," she said, finally giving him a piece of herself. Armin nodded warmly. "Nice to meet you, Mina. I'm Arif." He used a false name, choosing something simple so his real identity would remain hidden. Mina gave a small nod. "I don't usually talk to strangers, Arif sir. But today, I don't know why my heart feels so weak." Armin's gaze softened even more. Sometimes the heart needs to release what it has been holding for too long. Mina looked down at her hands. "I come here every day at dawn. I clean, I sweep, I mop, and I smile at people when they pass by. But inside, I am breaking. My son is sick. He needs medicine every month. I try to cover it with my small salary, but it is never enough. I borrowed money, and now the debt is crushing me. Sometimes I skip my meals so my child can eat." Her words cut through Armin like a blade. He felt his throat tighten, but he stayed calm for her sake. This was worse than he imagined. Behind the quiet cleaner's uniform was a mother fighting battles no one else could see. Mina wiped her face again, ashamed. "Forgive me, sir. I should not say all this. I don't want pity. I just couldn't hold it anymore." Armin bent slightly so his eyes met hers. "This is not pity, Mina. This is respect. You are stronger than you think. You are carrying so much, and yet you are still standing." Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears were mixed with a fragile sense of relief. Someone had finally listened without judgment. Armin wanted to tell her everything, that he was not just Arif, but the man who owned them all, the one who could help her instantly. But he held back. He needed to understand more. He needed to see the truth of her life without the shadow of his wealth. He smiled gently. "Thank you for trusting me with your story." Mina lowered her eyes, whispering, "It feels lighter now, even if nothing has changed." Armin stood quietly, but inside his heart was already making a silent promise something was going to change. Not today, not with quick words, but soon. Very soon. After that short conversation, Armin walked away slowly, but his mind was not at peace. The image of Mina's tired eyes and trembling hands stayed with him. Her voice echoed in his ears, "My son is sick. I skip meals so he can eat." It was not something he could forget in a moment. He had come undercover to see the real lives of his workers, but he had never expected the truth to be this heavy. Her pain felt personal, as if her story had reached a hidden corner of his own heart. Armin continued walking through the mall, pretending to be just another visitor. But his eyes no longer looked at the shining shops or the decorated windows. Instead, he noticed the workers, the cashier forcing a smile at a rude customer, the waiter standing with aching legs, the guard yawning after a sleepless night. Behind every face, there was a hidden story. And today, Mina's story had opened his eyes wider than ever. He wanted to know more. Who was this woman really? What was her life like outside these walls? What kind of world did she return to after hours of cleaning the mall? These questions burned in his mind. Later that afternoon, when the mall grew busier, Armin quietly moved toward the management office. Because he was undercover, he couldn't simply walk in as the owner. But he had his ways. He knew the schedules, the staff lists, and the records. He had memorized the names of many workers over the years, though they never knew him directly. He asked casually at the desk, pretending to be looking for someone. "Excuse me," he said, "I'm looking for a cleaner named Mina. I think she dropped something near the exit earlier." The young clerk looked up, then checked the duty chart. "Yes, Mina is on the morning and afternoon shift today. She works in Section C. You'll probably find her near the ground floor exits." Armin thanked him politely and left, hiding the small relief he felt. Now he knew where to look if he wanted to learn more. But his heart told him that simply meeting her in the mall was not enough. To understand her pain, he had to see her world outside. That evening, when workers finished their shifts, Armin waited quietly near the staff exit. He kept his distance so no one would notice him. Soon, Mina walked out, her uniform folded neatly in her bag, her face pale with tiredness. She held a small cloth bag in her hand and walked quickly, as though every minute mattered. Armin followed her from a safe distance. The streets grew narrower as she walked away from the city center. The shining lights of the mall disappeared, replaced by dim street lamps and broken pavements. Houses stood close together, with peeling paint and rusty gates. Children played barefoot in the dust, and the air smelled of smoke from cheap stoves. Finally, Mina stopped in front of a small, old building. The walls were cracked, and the staircase was dark. She climbed slowly, holding the railing for support. Armin waited a while before moving closer. Through the open window, he saw a tiny room with barely enough space for a bed and a small table. Inside, a boy lay on the bed, coughing softly. His face was pale, and his thin arms clutched a blanket. Mina hurried to him, touching his forehead with worried hands. Her eyes softened immediately, her sadness turning into care. She sat beside him, speaking in a gentle tone that carried both love and fear. Armin stood outside, his chest heavy. He could hear parts of her words, "Don't worry, Beta. I brought your medicine. You must stay strong." The boy's weak voice answered, "Am I? Did you eat today?" Mina smiled faintly, shaking her head. "I'll eat later. You first." She opened her small bag, pulling out a packet of bread and a strip of medicine. She gave the boy his dose, then tore a piece of bread and placed it in his hands. Her own stomach growled faintly, but she ignored it. Armin's throat tightened. Here was the truth, raw and painful. She was not only a worker cleaning floors in his mall, she was a mother fighting a quiet battle against poverty, hunger, and sickness. She gave everything she had to her child, leaving nothing for herself. He felt guilt rising in him. How many times had he walked past workers like her, believing that giving them a job was enough? He had built tall buildings and signed big contracts, but here, in this small room, he saw the real meaning of responsibility. He wanted to step inside, to offer her money, comfort, and hope. But he stopped himself. If he revealed his identity now, it might shock her. She might think he was only helping out of pity. No, he needed to do this differently. He needed to understand her life fully before deciding how to help. Armin walked away from the window, his heart burning with determination. Tomorrow, he would come again, not as a billionaire, not as an owner, but as Arif, the ordinary man who cared. He wanted Mina to trust him first, not his wealth. As he walked back toward the bright city lights, his steps felt heavier but his purpose clearer. This journey was no longer just about observing his workers. It was about changing something, maybe even changing himself. And deep inside, he knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. The next morning, Armin returned to the mall earlier than usual. He dressed the same way: simple shirt, worn-out shoes, and plain trousers. No one paid attention to him, and that was exactly what he wanted. He moved quietly to the section where Mina worked. She was already there, holding her mop, her back slightly bent as she scrubbed the floor. Her face looked pale, her eyes swollen as if she had not slept properly. Yet, when people walked past, she managed a polite smile. Armin noticed the strength in that small act, how she hid her pain so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. He walked closer and greeted softly, "Good morning, Mina." Mina looked up in surprise. A small spark of recognition lit her tired face. "Oh. Arif, sir. You came again." Armin smiled warmly. "Yes, I thought I'd see how you're doing. Is your son feeling any better?" Her hands froze on the mop, and for a second, she didn't answer. Then she sighed, lowering her eyes. "A little, but the cough is still there." Armin nodded, choosing his words carefully. "You're carrying a lot, Mina. If you want, you can tell me more. Sometimes sharing helps." Mina leaned the mop against the wall. She hesitated, but something in his calm eyes gave her courage. For years she had carried her burden silently, but now, for the first time, someone was willing to listen without judgment. She sat on the stool nearby, her voice trembling. "I wasn't always like this, Arif, sir. I had dreams once. My husband used to work in a small workshop. We lived a simple but happy life. Then one winter, he fell sick. Very sick. We tried everything: local doctors, medicines, even prayers, but we couldn't save him. I lost him, and with him, I lost the little stability we had." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't stop. "After that, everything fell on me. My son was just 5 then. I started working wherever I could, washing clothes in people's houses, scrubbing floors, carrying loads. Some people were kind, but many treated me as invisible. I accepted it, because I had no choice." Armin listened in silence, his heart aching with every word. Mina continued, her voice cracking. "When this mall opened, I was lucky to get a cleaning job here. At least it was regular. But the salary, it is never enough. My son's medicines take most of it. The rest goes into food and rent. And sometimes, even that is short." She pulled her hands together, twisting her fingers nervously. "I borrowed money from neighbors, then from a money lender. I thought I would pay it back quickly. But the interest keeps growing, and now I feel trapped. Some days, I don't eat just so my son doesn't sleep hungry." Armin clenched his fists in his pockets, hiding the storm rising inside him. He wanted to shout, to demand why someone like her had to suffer while the mall shined with profits. But he kept calm, for her sake. Mina lowered her gaze. "You know, sometimes I cry alone in corners because I don't want others to see. People think cleaners don't have hearts, that we are just part of the floor we wash. But I am a mother before I am a cleaner. I cry because I fear losing my son the way I lost my husband. If something happens to him, I don't know if I will survive. Her last words broke into a whisper. Tears rolled down her cheeks freely now. She tried to wipe them quickly, ashamed of her own weakness. Armin couldn't stay silent anymore. He leaned forward, his voice steady but full of emotion. Mina, you are not weak. You are stronger than anyone I know. Carrying all this alone, day after day, that is not weakness, that is courage. Mina shook her head slowly. Courage doesn't feed a hungry child, sir. Courage doesn't buy medicine. Her honesty pierced him deeper than any truth he had ever faced in boardrooms or meetings. He had dealt with investors, partners, and competitors, but none of those battles compared to this, a mother's fight to keep her child alive. He placed a hand gently on the back of the stool, careful not to cross the line of comfort. You don't have to carry this alone forever. Maybe help will come when you least expect it. Mina gave a weak smile, almost bitter. Help? People like us don't get help, Arif sir. We are the invisible ones. No one sees us until the floor is dirty or the bin is full. Then they notice. Otherwise, we are shadows. Her words felt like knives in Armin's chest. He wanted to say, I see you. I own this mall, and I see you now. But he stayed silent, keeping his disguise. If he revealed himself too soon, she might never trust his heart, she might only see his money. So instead, he said softly, maybe shadows shine brightest when someone chooses to look closely. Mina's lips trembled at those words. For a moment, she simply looked at him, her eyes searching for honesty. And what she saw seemed to give her a fragile comfort. Armin stood quietly after that, letting her breathe. He knew her truth now, the full weight of it. And deep inside, he made another silent promise. He would not let her drown in this struggle. Somehow, he would change her life. But for that, he needed patience. Trust was like a seed, it grew slowly. He had to let her believe in him as a person, not as a billionaire. Only then would his help truly matter. As he walked away, leaving Mina to her work, his heart carried her story like a fire. It was no longer just her battle, it had become his as well. That night, Armin sat in his study room at home. Though the house was filled with comfort and silence, his heart was restless. The story of Mina kept playing in his mind, her sick child, the debts, the tears she hid from the world. He had heard stories of poverty before, but listening to it directly, seeing it with his own eyes, made everything different. It was no longer numbers on a report, no longer distant charity work. It was real, living, breathing pain, and it was inside his own mall. Armin leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He could easily help her by writing a check. With his wealth, the debt could disappear in seconds. But he knew that was not enough. The problem was bigger. If Mina was suffering this much, how many other workers in his mall were also living in silence? He needed to know the truth. The next morning, he returned to the mall again, still in disguise. He greeted Mina briefly, giving her a gentle smile, then moved away so she wouldn't suspect his plan. He decided to follow the trail of her debt. He waited near the side gate after her shift ended. Mina walked quickly through the narrow streets, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion. This time, Armin kept a closer distance. He noticed when she stopped near a small shop with dirty glass windows. The signboard was half broken, but the words money transfer and loans were still visible. Mina stepped inside nervously, holding a small envelope. Armin stayed outside, pretending to buy fruit from a nearby cart. Through the window, he saw her speaking to a man behind the counter. The man's face was round, his eyes sharp, and his fingers played with a stack of papers as if they were toys. Armin could not hear the words, but he could see Mina's worried face as she handed the envelope. The man counted the money, then shook his head roughly. Mina lowered her head, almost pleading. The man waved his hand impatiently, as if dismissing her. She picked up her bag again and left, her eyes filled with fresh sadness. Armin felt anger rise in his chest. He followed Mina until she disappeared into her street, then returned to the small loan office. Pushing the door open, he stepped inside. The man behind the counter looked up lazily. "Yes? Do you need money?" Armin nodded, keeping his voice calm. "I just want to know how this works." The man smirked. "It's simple. You borrow today, you pay double later. That's how we survive. No bank will help poor people, so we do. Of course, if they delay, the interest grows." Armin's jaw tightened. "And if they can't pay?" The man shrugged. "Then they work more. Or we take what little they have. Life is business, sir. Nothing is free." Armin left the office with fire in his heart. Now he understood. Mina was not only struggling with her son's sickness and her small salary, she was also trapped by people who lived on the pain of the poor. It was worse than he imagined. That evening, he returned home but could not eat. His thoughts circled around Mina. He pictured her sitting in that small room, feeding her son bread, while greedy men squeezed the little money she earned. He walked into his private library and opened old files of the mall's workers. His staff records were detailed. He found Mina's profile: 34 years old, cleaner, working in the mall for 5 years. There were notes about her being silent, hard-working, never complained. Armin ran his hand across the page slowly. "Never complained," he whispered. That one line said everything. She had been suffering in silence, and no one in his management noticed or cared. The guilt inside him grew heavier. He had trusted his managers to take care of the workers, but clearly, many things were hidden. He had to see it himself. The next day, he began quietly asking around. He spoke with guards, waiters, sales staff, always as Arif, the ordinary man. Slowly, stories unfolded. Many workers said their salaries were too low to cover living costs. Some borrowed money like Mina, others worked double shifts. Everyone smiled in front of customers, but behind those smiles was a silent battle. Armin realized the truth: his empire looked strong from the outside, but inside, many of its pillars were breaking. And Mina's story was just one example. Later that evening, he met Mina again near the emergency exit. She was finishing her shift, her shoulders tired. Armin walked closer and said softly, "Mina, may I ask you something? Please don't feel pressured." She looked at him with tired eyes. "Yes, Arif sir." "Yesterday," he began carefully, "I saw you at a loan office. I'm sorry if I crossed a line, but I worry about you. Are they troubling you?" Mina froze. Her hands tightened on the mop. For a long moment, she stayed silent. Then she whispered, "Yes, but I have no choice. If I don't pay, they will come to my door. They will shame me in front of neighbors. My son will hear their loud voices. I cannot let that happen." Her voice broke at the last words. Armin felt something inside him crack. He wanted to tell her, "You are safe now. I will protect you." But again, he stayed silent about his true identity. Instead, he said gently, "You are not alone, Mina. Trust me. Things will change. Mina looked at him, confusion mixed with faint hope in her eyes. Why do you care so much, Arif sir? You barely know me. Arman gave a small, steady smile. Sometimes, knowing someone's pain is enough to care. She blinked, her lips trembling as though she wanted to say more but didn't. She simply nodded and went back to her work. Arman stood there, watching her. His decision was clear now. This was not just about kindness. This was justice. He would not let people like Mina live in chains while he sat in comfort. He would uncover every wrong, break every trap, and lift her out of this darkness. And soon, the world would know the truth. The days passed, but Arman's heart grew heavier with every passing moment. He continued his visits to the mall in simple clothes, meeting Mina whenever he could. Sometimes they spoke for a few minutes, sometimes only shared a quiet nod. But in those small moments, he felt something he had not felt in years, a connection that was real, not built on wealth or power. And yet, every time he stood before her, the secret of his true identity pressed on him like a stone. He wanted to tell her, I am not Arif, I am the man who owns this place. I can end your suffering today. But he held back. Something inside told him that if she discovered the truth too quickly, she might lose trust. She might believe his care was only pity, and that was the last thing he wanted. Arman wanted her to trust his heart, not his money. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Arman sat in his private office at the top floor of his company building. The city lights sparkled outside his glass windows, but he barely noticed them. His thoughts were with Mina and her son. His assistant entered, carrying files. Sir, these are the monthly reports. Arman nodded absent-mindedly, flipping through them. The numbers were high, profits had grown, sales were strong, investors were pleased. But none of it brought him joy. Behind those numbers were faces like Mina's, hidden stories of struggle that no chart could show. When his assistant left, Arman closed the files and leaned back, running a hand over his face. What kind of leader am I? He wondered. I built malls and towers, but I did not see the pain of the people who make them alive. That night, he barely slept. He thought of Mina's son, lying on that thin bed, coughing. He thought of the loan shark's smirk, feeding off the helpless. He thought of Mina's tired smile, still shining through her sorrow. The next morning, he returned to the mall early. He found Mina wiping tables near the food court. She looked weaker than usual, her steps slow. Mina, he greeted softly. She looked up, surprised but with a faint smile. Arif sir. You come here every day now? Arman chuckled gently. Maybe I enjoy good company. Her smile widened slightly, though her eyes still carried weight. They sat on a bench nearby for a moment. Arman studied her face, noticing the lines of stress that should not belong to someone her age. He wanted so badly to tell her everything, to promise her a safe future. But once again, fear held him back. Mina, he asked carefully, if one day someone offered you real help, would you accept it? She looked at him for a long time, then shook her head slowly. I don't know. People who offer help often expect something in return. And people like me, we cannot give anything back. Her words cut deep into him. He wanted to cry out, I want nothing from you, only to see you free. But he stayed quiet, understanding her fear. She had been disappointed too many times in life to believe in sudden kindness. Arman sighed inwardly. If he told her he was the billionaire owner, Would she trust him? Or would she build a wall between them, thinking his sympathy was charity? He could not risk losing the fragile trust she had slowly begun to give him. That day, instead of forcing answers, Armin decided to act differently. He began planning in silence. He visited the loan office again, this time with his true identity. The loan shark was shocked to see him, standing in front of his small desk. Armin's eyes were cold, his voice firm. "You will erase every debt that belongs to my workers," he ordered. "If I hear you have taken a single coin more from them, you will not have this office tomorrow." The man stammered, trying to defend himself, but Armin's glare silenced him. By the time he left, the records were already being adjusted. Mina's debt was gone, but she did not know yet. Armin wanted the right time to tell her. Later, he called his senior managers. He demanded a full review of worker salaries, medical support, and living conditions. "They are the backbone of this mall," he said firmly. "Without them, this empire is nothing. From today, we treat them with the dignity they deserve." His managers nodded nervously, unused to seeing him so fierce about worker welfare. That evening, Armin returned to the mall again, dressed as Arif. He found Mina near the entrance, packing her things. She looked exhausted, but when she saw him, her face softened. "You are here again," she said quietly. Armin smiled. "Yes. I told you I like good company." For a while, they walked side by side through the busy corridors. Neither spoke much, but the silence between them was not heavy. It was gentle, almost comforting. As they parted near the exit, Armin stopped and looked at her. His heart beat faster. Should he tell her now? Should he reveal everything? The words reached his lips, "Mina, I am not who you think I am," but then he swallowed them back. "Not yet." Instead, he said softly, "Mina, hold on a little longer. Life may surprise you in ways you don't expect." She looked at him strangely, as if trying to read his meaning. But she only nodded, whispering, "I hope so." As she walked away, Armin stood still, his heart burning. The time for secrets was running out. Soon, very soon, the truth would have to be told. The next morning, the mall was alive as always. Shoppers moved quickly past the shiny stores, children laughed in the play area, and the food court smelled of fresh bread and coffee. Yet, amidst all the normal bustle, Armin's heart was pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Today, he would finally reveal the truth to Mina. He found her near the ground floor, mopping the floor with quiet determination. Her movements were slow, tired, yet precise. Even after all her hardships, she carried herself with dignity. Armin watched her for a moment, wondering if she would ever truly understand the weight she had carried alone for so many years. He walked closer and said gently, "Mina, can we talk for a moment?" Mina looked up, surprised to see him again so early. "Of course, Arif sir," she replied, her voice polite but cautious. They moved to a quiet corner near the emergency exit, away from the busy shoppers. Armin's hands trembled slightly. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Years of silence, struggle, and invisible pain were about to meet the truth. "Mina," he began softly, "I've come to know your story. I have seen your struggle, your courage, and your love for your son. And I need to tell you something very important." Mina tilted her head, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" she asked, a slight worry in her eyes. Armin took a deep breath. "I am not Arif. I am the owner of this mall. For a moment, Mina froze. Her hands gripped the mop tightly, her eyes wide in disbelief. "You, what?" "I am Armin," he said, his voice calm but filled with sincerity. "I came here disguised, because I wanted to see the truth of life inside this mall. I wanted to understand the struggles of the people who keep this place alive, without any influence of my wealth or position." Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She blinked, as if trying to process his words. You are the owner," she whispered, barely audible. "Yes," Armin replied, "and I have seen your courage, your sacrifice, and your strength. You carry so much for your son, and yet you never complain. I want to help you. Not because I am rich, but because you deserve to live without fear, without debt, without endless worry." Mina's hands dropped from the mop. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were not only sadness, they were disbelief, relief, and hope all at once. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "I never expected. I thought life would always be this, hard." Armin shook his head gently. "No one deserves to live in fear or pain, Mina. Your debt has been cleared, and the people who made your life difficult have been stopped. From today, you and your son will not have to worry about rent, medicine, or food. You can focus on what matters most, your family and your future." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "But, why? Why would you do this for me?" "Because I have seen your heart," Armin said softly. "And because someone finally needs to see the truth, and act on it. You have given so much to this world silently, and it is time someone gives back to you." Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she finally let them fall freely. For years, she had carried her pain alone. Now, someone truly cared, not as a stranger, but as a human being who had the power to make things right. Armin reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Mina, you are not invisible anymore. You are seen. You are valued. You are safe." She looked at him, her voice breaking. I don't know how to thank you. You've given me hope, something I thought I would never feel again." Armin smiled warmly. "No thanks are needed. Just live your life freely. Watch your son grow. Smile without fear. That is all the thanks I need." For the first time in years, Mina felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She thought of her son, the long nights of worry, the endless sacrifices. And now, a new chapter had begun. Armin spent the next few weeks quietly ensuring that her life changed in small, meaningful ways. He arranged medical care for her son, increased her salary, and made sure she had support for daily living. But he always let her feel that these changes came naturally, not from his wealth but from someone who believed in her. Over time, Mina's confidence returned. She worked with a lighter heart, smiled more freely, and even began helping other workers in small ways. She no longer felt invisible, and her son's laughter returned to their small home, echoing through the rooms like music she had longed to hear. And Armin? He continued to walk among his people, sometimes as the billionaire, sometimes as Arif. But one thing was certain: his heart had changed. He had seen the truth of courage, love, and sacrifice. And in helping Mina, he had discovered the true meaning of wealth, not the money he owned, but the lives he could touch. The mall continued to shine with lights, profits, and crowds. But now, behind the scenes, there was hope, justice, and the quiet happiness of a mother and her son, finally free from fear. And in that freedom, both Mina and Armin discovered that true wealth is measured not in numbers, but in love, trust, and the courage to change a life.